Welcome back, everybody. You read it in the title, you saw it in the thumbnail. The wait is finally over. The big news is here. The Ironman World Championships will be going back to a one-day format in Kona with the men and women back together in 2026. That's the big news that we're gonna break down today. But there's also the news that we finally have the location for the 2026 70.3 World Championships, as well as the 2028 70.3 World Championships. You can probably guess where that is. But we've just got this announcement today. I'm still wrapping my head around it. We're going to dive into the details, what we know so far, and the why behind this decision. And then I'll also do my best to give you my first impression, my reaction, and my opinion to it. I'm sure this is gonna raise some big questions from you at the end, and please do drop them in the comments as well as your initial reaction. I'd love to try and answer some of those questions, as well as I just love to see what you think about this. I will also drop some links in the description for you to read more about the announcement. So diving in, let me read it to you again. Ironman announced today that starting in 2026, they are going to return to that one-day format in Kona that we've seen before, and they'll no longer have the split locations, the rotating locations, or the split genders that we've had the last couple of years. And yes, with that announcement, that means the women will no longer be racing each other again in Nice in 2026, as was the original plan, and that Laura Philipp will be the only Ironman Nice World Champion for the women. But instead of that 2026 full Ironman, it is going to now be the 70.3 World Championships that's held in Nice in 2026. And then it's also going to be held there in 2028 with the option to extend to another 70.3 World Championships in 2030, but that one's not confirmed yet. And also, these 70.3 World Championships in Nice are going to be before the Ironman World Championships in Kona, around the same time that we've seen these recent races in Nice, September 12th and September 13th, which is quite big news in itself, considering we've seen some 70.3 World Champs recently at the latter end of the year, which changes up the season completely. So keep that in mind. So why have Ironman decided to make this decision and change up their initial plan? Well, I'm sure you can guess why that is, and it's because mainly of the extensive community feedback they've said that shows unequivocally that men and women want to race the World Championships in Kona, and that they also want to do it together and not separately. Shared some specific stats saying that versus the current split location format that we've seen, surveys said that 69% of pro women and 78% of pro men wanted a one-day in Kona race. And then on the age group side of things, 58% of women and 66% of men. And for those age groupers, we've seen this highlighted by the take rates for World Championship slots being 2 times higher for Kona than it was for Nice. They also shared that they found athletes are now qualifying more than ever in their first ever Ironman to the World Championships, and I believe this is largely in part due to the increased number of slots that were on offer because of the split locations and split genders. But they said they found that because of those increased numbers at the World Championships from people doing their first Ironman and qualifying, they found that people tend to retire from the sport sooner because they've reached the pinnacle already of the sport and achieved their dream, which is not what they want, and they want to keep growing the global triathlon community, of course. But they also shared honestly that the other main reason is that Kona is just still Kona. As you've heard me talk about a lot of times, if you've been following this channel for a while, it's just so deeply intertwined with our sport. It's just that mysterious, energetic place that's different than anywhere else you can race. And they highlighted this with the fact that the event coverage, the broadcast, and social media stats are just immensely higher in Kona in the last couple of years than they have been in Nice. Okay, so let's dive into the details we do know. What do we know about this reimagined one-day Kona race that they're calling it? Well, they said it's designed to promote exciting and fair competition. And part of that is they said new media platforms will increase the coverage of the race and help out with that equal broadcast coverage for both the professional men and women. They planned for new start times and swim waves that are going to increase that fair competition across both races. as well as other advancements to elevate the race experience for all athletes. But now a big one for age groupers looking to qualify and race here. They've now said they're planning to make operational changes which will allow nearly 3,000 athletes to compete here, which is quite an increase to the previous around 2,400 we've seen in Kona on that pier before. So it'll be interesting to see how they pull that off. But those were the main details shared in this press release, and sadly not too many more specific details that I can give you. I'm sure more and more will come out soon, but I still think we'll have lots of questions as it still is a fair bit away, so we'll just have to sit tight with some of these things. But my initial reaction, my initial impressions, here we go. First off was, man, I'm a little bummed that we won't be seeing that women's Nice race in 2026. I am surprised they didn't just finish it out and decide to go back to Kona in 2027. I think this is mainly personally for me here as a fan. I would have loved to see that rematch between Laura Philipp and Kat Matthews on that course, as well as some of the other big names that we didn't really get to see compete there, like Anne Haug with her flat tire, Lucy Charles-Barkley pulling out just before the race, as well as Taylor Knibb, who I thought would have made a great addition to that race. But yeah, for now, I think it'll just feel like an unfinished chapter, and then led me to realize that I think I'm going to miss the rotating World Championship destinations. I think it just mixed it up for the pros in a really good way, where certain pros who will never do good in the heat and humidity could shine on these differing courses. We've seen this with the 70.3 World Championships rotating every year. I love that it gives different athletes a different chance. And we already saw it in Nice with athletes like Marjolaine Pierre making a huge difference in the women's race there. And I think especially with the Pro Series as well, you have to remember that the World Championships has those heavily weighted points, and athletes who struggle in that heat and humidity are going to have a tough time to compete for the top spots in the Pro Series going forward. But still, overall, I am so excited that the men and women are back together. Personally, I can't wait for that atmosphere again in Kona. In fact, I've actually never experienced it. The last 2 years that I've been there has been when it's been split up, and all I heard about while I was there was how different it is to when the men and women were together, and how just everybody wanted it to be back to that way. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think that's how it's supposed to be. I do think that 3,000 athletes or so that they're hoping to put on that pier is going to be a big challenge. Things are really tight in that area. They've already moved the pro athletes to gain some more spots on the pier onto the road. So it's definitely going to take some big changes, and I'm sure they'll work with the city on that. And Ironman is super good logistically. I'm sure if they believe and they're willing to put their name on the line that they can do this, I think they can pull it off. And in general, I think it's great that Ironman really did listen to the community on this. I think it takes some thick skin to retrace your steps and go back after being so positive on their decision to go to Nice and to split up the men and the women. Of course, a lot of that was to do with giving women their own spotlight and their own coverage and having a much more fair race. So I think Ironman has put their name on the line here big time in this press release, with promising equal coverage, innovative changes to the start time, the swim waves. I think this is going to be a big undertaking for them to pull it all off, and I wish we had some more details on how they're exactly planning on doing this. I'm sure lots of you are going to be speculating like me, but we've already seen how they've changed recently and made an announcement. The 70.3 start times between the pro men and pro women, pushing that back just a little bit, and in courses where they can push it back even more, they hope to do that as well. So I think that was a fantastic step, and I'm sure that's going to take place as well at Kona. But a lot of the time, it's not just the slow pro males who get in the way of the women's race, but it's the fast age groupers. So how they're going to mix up the waves to keep them separated is going to be a big undertaking, especially with them having only so many hours in the day to pull it off in Kona. So yeah, some big changes going to happen for the age group side of things too. But I do love that Nice is staying on as a world championship course for the 70.3 world champs for a couple of years. That means we'll be able to see rematches from the first race in 2026 to the second race in 2028. We also saw how good of a race it was back in 2019 when Gustav Iden, Daniela Ryf won there. And I think a lot of athletes are gonna race it because it's like 4 weeks before the World Champs in Kona, which is a good amount of time. It is on the other side of the world, so I'm sure some will skip it, but I think especially in 2026, it's not 2028 where the Olympics is going on. We'll see a lot of these short course athletes who we've seen step up take on this race as well. And when the 70.3 World Champs has been later on in the year, we've seen a lot of these athletes call it their seasons early and decide not to race it. So hopefully this encourages more athletes to do it. But that's honestly for now my main first reactions. I'm still processing it like you are right now, I'm sure. And I'll definitely make a follow-up video on this when I've thought through it more and seen and heard some of your reactions. I'd love to hear what you think about those start times, if you're an age grouper, if you're someone who's raced Kona before. And especially, I'd love to hear from some of the women listening, as I think this is a bigger change for the women than the men, as you just got your own day in Nice and your own coverage and spotlight. And I think that could be one of the big pushbacks against this announcement. And, you know, nothing they said here was indefinite, which means, you know, things can change. They've showed this with this press release as well, and we know they are listening. So who knows, we might go back again to rotating, but this time together as men and women. We might have a 2-day race again in Kona if they can figure out the logistics for that, which they didn't say much at all about in the briefing, which makes me think that still that is a far off possibility with the impact that it had on the community before. But yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Not much else is needed with this huge news. Let me know, as I've said, your initial reactions down below, and have a wonderful day. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.